Most people who talk to themselves have been told at some point that it's weird. Maybe someone caught you muttering under your breath while grocery shopping, or whispering to yourself while working through a problem, and gave you that look, that slightly raised eyebrow, that quiet judgment. And maybe, just for a second, you felt embarrassed, like something was wrong with you. But here is the truth that psychology has known for a long time, and that most people have never heard. Talking to yourself is not a sign that something is off. It is actually one of the clearest indicators of a rare and powerful mind. The people who do it most are often the ones who think the deepest, feel the most, and process the world in ways that others simply cannot keep up with. So if you talk to yourself, this video is for you. And by the end of it, I want you to see this habit not as something to hide, but as something to understand, something to appreciate, and honestly, something to be proud of. Let's get into it. The first rare trait is that you have an exceptionally organized mind. Here is something most people do not realize. When you talk to yourself, you are not just rambling. You are actually performing one of the most sophisticated cognitive functions the human brain is capable of. You are translating internal chaos into external order. Psychology shows that self-talk is directly connected to a mental process called verbal self-regulation. This is the brain's way of using language to manage its own thinking. When you say things out loud, even quietly, even in a whisper, you are essentially forcing your thoughts to become linear. You are taking something abstract and swirling and turning it into something structured and clear. Think about the last time you talked yourself through a problem. Maybe you were deciding between two options, and you said something like, "Okay, so if I do this, then that happens, but if I go the other way, then maybe." You were not just thinking, you were organizing. You were creating a sequence, building logic, making connections that your brain could follow step by step. Research from the University of Michigan found that people who use self-directed speech when working through challenges perform significantly better on problem-solving tasks than those who work through problems silently. The act of speaking activates different neural pathways than silent thought alone. It recruits language centers in the brain that add a layer of structure to whatever you are processing. What this means about you is that your mind does not like disorder. Even when life feels overwhelming, even when everything feels tangled, you have developed a natural tool for making sense of things. You talk because your brain craves clarity. And that is not a quirk. That is an extraordinary cognitive strength. People who can organize their thoughts clearly, who can take complexity and break it down into something manageable, are some of the most effective problem solvers, decision makers, and communicators in the world. And you have been doing this your whole life, probably without even realizing it. The second rare trait is that you have a deeply developed sense of self-awareness. There is a difference between people who move through life on autopilot and people who are constantly in conversation with their own inner world. If you talk to yourself regularly, you almost certainly belong to the second group, and that puts you in a minority that most people never enter. Self-talk requires a relationship with yourself. When you say, "Why did I do that?" or "I need to be more patient," or "Come on, you can do this," you are not just producing sounds. You are engaging with yourself as a subject. You are observing your own thoughts, questioning your own behavior, coaching your own emotions. This is what psychologists call metacognition, which simply means thinking about your own thinking. And it is one of the rarest and most valuable mental abilities a person can develop. Psychology shows that high self-awareness is one of the strongest predictors of emotional intelligence, healthy relationships, and long-term personal growth. People who understand themselves tend to make better decisions, not because they are smarter, but because they have a clearer picture of who they are, what they value, and what they are actually feeling in a given moment. Here is a relatable example. You have a difficult conversation with someone, and it does not go well. Afterward, most people either replay it with frustration or push it out of their mind entirely. But if you are someone who talks to yourself, you probably do something different. You process it out loud. You say things like, "I reacted too quickly there," or "I should have said it differently," or "I wonder what they were actually trying to say." You are not just feeling the experience. You are examining it. You are learning from it. You are growing from it in real time. That is a level of self-reflection that most people simply do not practice. And research from Harvard Business School has shown that people who spend even a small amount of time each day in reflective practice, examining their experiences and their responses to them, improve in performance and self-understanding at a significantly faster rate than those who do not. You have been doing this naturally. Your self-talk is not noise. It is your inner voice actively building the most important relationship you will ever have, the one with yourself. The third rare trait is that you possess unusually high emotional resilience. Life will always bring difficulty. That is not pessimism. It is simply the truth of being human. But what separates people is not whether they face hard things. It is how they move through them. And if you talk to yourself, you have likely developed one of the most powerful tools for emotional survival without ever being taught how. When people face stress, anxiety, or fear, the emotional centers of the brain can quickly become flooded. Your heart rate climbs. Your thoughts start to spiral. Everything feels urgent and overwhelming. But research shows that one of the most effective ways to interrupt that spiral is through something remarkably simple: narrating your experience out loud. Studies published in the journal Psychological Science found that when people use self-talk, particularly using their own name or referring to themselves in the third person, they create a kind of emotional distance that allows them to process difficult feelings without becoming consumed by them. In other words, talking to yourself helps you become the observer rather than being trapped inside the emotion. And that skill is the foundation of resilience. Think about the last time you were nervous, maybe before a presentation, a difficult conversation, or a major decision. If you were someone who talks to yourself, you probably said something like, "Okay, take a breath. You know what to do. One step at a time." That is emotional regulation happening in real time. You are becoming your own source of stability, and that is incredibly rare. The fourth rare trait is that you are likely far more creative than average. When most people hear the word creativity, they imagine artists, musicians, or inventors. But creativity is much bigger than that. At its core, creativity is the ability to generate possibilities, to imagine alternatives, to mentally explore scenarios before they happen. And one of the most powerful ways the brain does that is through internal dialogue. When you talk to yourself, you create a conversation between different perspectives. One part of you says, "What if I try this?" Another part says, "But what about this option?" And another asks, "What if there is a completely different approach?" This process creates flexibility and allows your mind to move beyond the first answer and explore new ones. Research has found that people who regularly engage in internal dialogue often score higher on measures of creative thinking, because creativity is not just inspiration. It is exploration, it is curiosity, and it is the willingness to consider possibilities that others might dismiss. If you often find yourself talking through ideas, exploring different angles, and mentally rehearsing possibilities, there is a good chance you are exercising a level of creative cognition that many people never reach. The fifth rare trait is that you tend to think independently. One of the hidden benefits of self-talk is that it gives you a private space to test ideas without immediately needing approval from other people. You can argue with yourself, challenge your own assumptions, and refine your thinking before you ever speak publicly. This often leads to more original conclusions because your ideas have been stress-tested internally first. Think about inventors, entrepreneurs, scientists, and writers. Many of them describe their breakthrough moments as conversations with themselves, not because they were disconnected from reality, but because they were deeply engaged with it. Their minds were active enough to hold a genuine dialogue, and that is exactly what self-talk creates. The sixth rare trait is that you are unusually good at learning from experience. Most people have experiences, but not everyone learns from them. They move from one moment to the next without ever stopping to ask, "What can this teach me?" But people who talk to themselves often do exactly that. They replay situations not to punish themselves, but to understand them. They ask what worked, what did not work, and what they should do differently next time. That process transforms experience into wisdom, and wisdom compounds over time, which means every challenge, every mistake, and every uncomfortable moment becomes raw material for growth. That is why people who reflect tend to grow faster than people who merely react. Over the years, they accumulate lessons, patterns, and insights that other people often miss. So if you talk to yourself, take a moment and consider everything we have talked about today. You may have spent years believing that this habit was strange, something to hide, something to feel embarrassed about. But what if the opposite is true? What if this habit is actually evidence of a mind that is constantly working, organizing, reflecting, adapting, and growing? Maybe that is why you notice things that other people overlook. Maybe it is why you learn faster from your mistakes. Maybe it is why you remain calm in situations that overwhelm others. And maybe it is why you often come up with ideas that seem to appear out of nowhere, when in reality your mind has been working on them all along. So the next time you catch yourself talking out loud, do not rush to judge it. Pause, listen, and pay attention to what that voice is actually doing. It might be revealing strengths you never realized you had. If this video resonated with you, subscribe for more psychology insights and personality discoveries. And let us know in the comments, do you talk to yourself? And which of these rare traits describes you best?